In this video, we are going to learn to use something called the discriminant to be able to look at a quadratic equation and figure out how many solutions it will have without solving it. So let's talk about what the discriminant is and where it comes from, and then we'll use it again and again and again. So keep in mind that the discriminant actually comes from something called the quadratic formula, which you've learned in previous videos, and if you haven't, please go back and learn that. So it's the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's the quadratic formula. It gives you the solutions to any quadratic equation, provided that the quadratic equation is set equal to 0. Now, the discriminant is this part right in here. It's the part inside the square root. To discriminate, right, is to judge, right, something. So you're prejudging something. It's not good to discriminate between people, but it's definitely good to discriminate between number of solutions. That's why we call it the discriminant. So how do we do that? Well, let's think about this. This part right here, you've got the plus or minus square root of the discriminant. If the number inside of here is positive, so if you get b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, then you have two solutions. Plus or minus a positive number would give you two different numbers, plus that number and minus that number, two solutions. If you have plus or minus and the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is 0, the square root of 0 is 0, so you'd be adding 0 or subtracting 0. That's the same number, adding 0 or subtracting 0. So that'd be one solution. So this would be two solutions, two real solutions, one solution, and then if I have a negative number inside of here, this would be 0 real solutions. So there'd be no real solutions right there, because you cannot take the square root of a negative number and get out a real number. Interesting. Oftentimes this is written as b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, and b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. I like to think of it as just focus in on the square root part and then think about if you have a square root plus or minus of a positive, how that gives you two numbers. Plus or minus 0 gives you just the same one number, and you can't take the square root of a negative. When it's less than 0, there's no solutions. Rather than memorizing it as something separate, use what you know from the quadratic formula. Okay, I'm going to keep this on the board and refer back to it for A and for C, and then we'll go back to B and use it with our noggin. Okay, so all we're doing here is we're using this part. So we've got B, we'll just write it all out. A is negative 5, just like we do for the quadratic formula. B is 7, and C is 2. So we're just going to use the b squared minus 4ac part. B squared is 7 squared, minus 4 times A is negative 5, times C is positive 2. Now you don't need to know what the final answer is, you just need to know if this value is positive, negative, or 0. So we get 49, minus 4 times minus 5 is positive 20, times 2. I'm going to stop there, because 49 plus a positive number is greater than 0. And since we have plus or minus the square root of a positive number, we will get how many solutions? 2. So the discriminant shows, since it's positive, that we get two solutions. That's it. All right, let's use it again here. So we get 4x squared minus 5x plus 10 equals 0. So again, I'll list out A, B, and C. A is 4, B is negative 5, and C is 10. So if we take a look at the discriminant, again, that's going to be b squared minus 4ac. We want to know what's going on there. Well, I'll take b, I'll square it. That's going to give me 25. Negative 5 times negative 5 is b squared. Then we'll plug in minus 4 times a is 4 times c is 10. Now that's 24 minus 4 times 4 is 16 times 10. Now I'm going to stop there. You don't care what the final number is, just you care about the sign. 25 minus 16 times 10 is going to be negative. And so we're going to end up with plus or minus the square root of a negative number. We can't take the square root of a negative number, so the quadratic formula will yield 0 real solutions, so no real solutions. Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty rad, y'all, pretty rad. Okay, so we'll do one more, we'll erase all this, give us some room for this middle problem, and here we go. So again, using that quadratic formula's part, the discriminant, the thing that discriminates. B squared minus 4a times c. A is equal to 1, it's our leading coefficient. B is equal to negative 16. And now c is not negative 64. You'd actually have to add 64 over to the right side to set everything equal to 0. Otherwise, we can't use the quadratic formula. And this is a part of the quadratic formula. So c is equal to positive 64. Let's see what we get. Well, b squared is negative 16 squared. Minus 4 times a is 1. Times c is 64. We might need a calculator. Negative 16 times itself is positive 256. Minus 4 times 1 is 4, times 64 is 256. Ooh, that's equal to 0. So our discriminant is 0, which means in the quadratic formula you'd have plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which is plus or minus 0. Whether I add 0 to a number or subtract 0, I'll get the same value out. So that means there's one solution. It's awesome. So you could memorize, certainly, the fact that b squared minus 4ac is the discriminant, that when it's greater than 0, you have two solutions. When it's equal to 0, you have one solution. And when it's less than 0, you have no real solutions. You could memorize that. Or you could go through the kind of logic that we went through in this video and see that b squared minus 4ac is just a part that discriminates between the number of solutions, and we get it as a part from the quadratic formula. I'll see you in the next video. That was rad. I had fun, as always.